Hi, this is Dr. Sobita Kirtani, Assistant Professor in the Department of Psychology of Parvati Bai Chogale College of Arts and Science. It's a marvel how human beings are designed. Human beings can be understood as a system made up of different components, different parts that are coordinated, interconnected for smooth functioning of an individual. The most complex organ of human body is the brain. In this unit, on biological foundations of behavior, we discuss how human behavior is determined by biological systems. In particular, in this model, I will be talking about structures of the brain and their functions. This is part 1 of this topic. I will be talking about levels of organization of the brain, the hindbrain, midbrain, and the forebrain. At the end of this module, students will be able to describe levels of organization of the brain and explain the different functions of hindbrain, midbrain, and the forebrain. Brain per se is not differentiated into different parts, but for our understanding, we look at these different structures and organize them into different levels. The brain is organized in 3 levels for our understanding. There is the hindbrain, the midbrain, and the forebrain. If you look at this picture, the lower portion of the brain is the hindbrain. Toward the center is the midbrain, and the larger portion of the brain is the forebrain. Wonder why the forebrain is so large? Well, we'll look into it. The hindbrain is at the base, the rear of the skull. It is the lowermost portion of the brain. The hindbrain is made up of the medulla, cerebellum, and the pons. The medulla begins where the spinal cord enters the skull. It controls breathing, regulates reflexes that allow maintenance of upright posture. The cerebellum is located just above the medulla. It consists of 2 rounded structures that play a key role in the coordination of complex muscle movements. All activities that require muscular activity involve the cerebellum. So right from playing cricket, kicking a ball, to writing, to driving and dancing, whatever requires muscular coordination involves the cerebellum. So what happens if the cerebellum is damaged? Damage to the cerebellum can lead to uncoordinated and jerky movements. An extensive damage to the cerebellum can in fact even make it impossible for people to stand up. The pons is a bridge in the hindbrain. It's involved in sleep and arousal. The second level of the brain is the midbrain. As the name suggests, it lies between the hindbrain and the forebrain. The midbrain consists of several nerve fiber systems that ascend and descend to connect the upper and lower portions of the brain. The midbrain also relays information between the brain and the eyes and the ears. 2 systems of special interest of the midbrain are: one is the reticular formation. Now, the reticular formation is a diffused collection of neurons involved in stereotype patterns of behavior. Typical patterns of behavior like walking, sleeping, turning to attend to sudden noise. The other system is made up of small groups of neurons which are involved in high-level integrated functions. The midbrain is also made up another structure called as the brainstem. Now the brainstem actually includes the hindbrain as well. but not the cerebellum. It includes the rest of the hindbrain and much of the midbrain. It connects with the spinal cord at its lower end and extends upward to encase the reticular formation in the midbrain. The brainstem is one of the most ancient structures of the brain that evolved around 500 million years ago. Clusters of cells in the brainstem determine alertness and regulate basic survival functions such as breathing, heartbeat, and blood pressure. Would you wonder why brainstem is involved in such basic functions? Well, it is absolutely because it was the first brain structure to evolve. The forebrain. While the brainstem is the most ancient part of the brain, the forebrain is the most recent part of the brain in the evolutionary scheme. Forebrain is the highest level of the brain. It consists of two distinct areas. One area contains the limbic system, thalamus, basal ganglia, and hypothalamus. The other area is made up of the cerebral cortex, which I will be discussing in the next module. These two areas differ structurally as also functionally. So let's look at the picture of the forebrain. You have the thalamus, you have amygdala and the hippocampus, which is the limbic system. You have the basal ganglia and you have the hypothalamus. The limbic system is a loosely connected network of structures under the cerebral cortex. It is important in both memory and emotion. So when you study about emotion, when you study about emotional development, when you study about emotional intelligence, you will invariably study about the limbic system. The limbic system consists of two principal structures, the amygdala and the hippocampus. The amygdala derives its name from the Latin word which describes its shape, almond shape. Amygdala is involved in discrimination of objects that are necessary for the organism's survival, such as appropriate food, mate, and social rivals. It is the amygdala which tells us what is appropriate to eat and what is not, who would be an appropriate mate and who would not. Now, lesions in the amygdala can cause animals to attempt to eat, fight, or mate with inappropriate objects such as chairs. The amygdala also is involved in emotional awareness and expression. In fact, damage to the amygdala can cause apathy, which is no feeling of emotions at all. The hippocampus plays a major role in the storage of memories as also formation of new memories. This is the second part of the limbic system. Now, it ties together sights, sounds, and meanings of memories stored in various parts of the cerebral cortex. But it's not the limbic system where the memories are stored. Instead, the limbic system only determines which of the information passing through the forebrain ought to be saved as memories, which of these need to be filed as memories. Thalamus is the next structure which sits at the top of the brain stem in the central core of the brain. It serves as a very important relay station. What do we mean by relay station? What the thalamus does is whatever information comes to the thalamus from different sense organs, it sorts the information and directs it to different parts of the brain, to appropriate parts of the brain for further processing, integration, and interpretation. So one part of the thalamus works with other parts of the brain to process sensory information, while another region of the thalamus is involved in sleep and wakefulness. Then we have the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia are large clusters or ganglia of neurons that lie above the thalamus and under the cerebral cortex. The basal ganglia work with the cerebellum and the cerebral cortex to control and coordinate voluntary movements. So though basal ganglia is a part of the forebrain, it has connection with the hindbrain, that is the cerebellum, as well. It enables people to engage in habitual behaviors such as riding a bicycle. Damage to basal ganglia leads to either unwanted movement such as jerking of limbs or too little movement. We now have the hypothalamus, which is a small but practically the most or one of the most important structures of the brain. This lies underneath the thalamus, just in front of the midbrain. It monitors three pleasurable activities: eating, drinking, and sex. Classic experiment done by James Olds and Peter Milner in 1954 helped us understand the importance of the hypothalamus as a pleasure center. So James Olds and Peter Milner inserted an electrode into the hypothalamus of a rat. Every time the rat would run to the corner of an enclosed space, a mild electric current would be passed to the hypothalamus. They believed that the rat would avoid the corner, but they were shocked to find that the rat kept going back to that corner to get more stimulation. This led to the discovery of hypothalamus as a pleasure center. Today, researchers believe that it's not only the hypothalamus, but there are other centers in the brain like the limbic system which are also involved in pleasure. The old studies have implications for drug addiction. Cocaine users, for instance, often talk about how intake of cocaine enhances pleasure that they obtain from food and sex. It's the hypothalamus which gets stimulated. The hypothalamus, as I said, is a very important structure of the brain because it plays multiple roles. It's involved in emotional states and stress. So when you study about emotions, when you study about stress, you're talking about the hypothalamus. It is the brain center most directly linked to the functions of the autonomic nervous system. So when you're talking about the autonomic nervous system, you will be discussing about the hypothalamus. It also helps to regulate the endocrine system, and that is what we are going to do in one of the modules later. And it plays a key role in regulating body's internal state. It helps in maintaining temperature, it helps in maintaining balance within the body. With that, we complete the seventh module rather, okay, which talks about structures of the brain and functions of the brain. So what do you think? Which of these is the most important structure that influences human behavior? Well, to find an answer to that question, I suggest you read these books which are mandatory, or you could go through these suggested readings as well. Thank you.